When you think about the absolute pinnacle of German automotive engineering wrapped in hand-stitched Nappa leather, Mercedes has been playing this game longer than most manufacturers have existed. But here's the thing that a lot of people miss when they're scrolling through configurators at 2 a.m. with champagne dreams and beer budgets. Not every six-figure Mercedes is actually worth the metal it's stamped from. Some of these cars represent genuine engineering milestones that'll be talked about in 30 years. Others are just expensive ways to tell your neighbors you have questionable financial priorities. Over the next 15 minutes, we're breaking down 5 Mercedes vehicles that actually justify their existence in the luxury segment. And I'm not talking about the cars that show up in every rapper's music video or the ones your local real estate agent leases to feel important. These are the machines that combine Mercedes' 130-plus years of motorsport heritage, actual technological innovation, and the kind of build quality that makes a 10-year-old Camry feel like it was assembled by drunk toddlers. We're looking at everything from the electric revolution Mercedes is betting their future on, to the absurd SUVs that somehow make physics negotiable, to the four-door rockets that'll embarrass dedicated sports cars at every stoplight. And before the comment section explodes, yes, I know about the AMG GT Black Series, yes, I know about the Project One. We're focusing on cars you can actually order from a dealer without needing to prove you already own 7 other Mercedes or promising your firstborn to some allocation manager in Stuttgart. These are attainable dream cars, relatively speaking, and each one represents something genuinely special about where Mercedes-Benz sits in 2024's automotive landscape. Let's get into it. Number 5. Mercedes-AMG GT63 E-Performance, the 843 horsepower Executive Express. The AMG GT63 E-Performance has a name longer than some of my college essays, but underneath that alphabet soup of a badge sits one of the most technically ambitious cars Mercedes has ever built. This isn't just an AMG with a battery pack slapped in the trunk. This is what happens when the engineers at Affalterbach look at Porsche's Panamera Turbo SE Hybrid and say, "Hold my Weissbier." Let's talk about what makes this thing special. The core of it is AMG's hand-built 4.0-liter twin-turbocharged V8, the M177 engine that's been the backbone of their performance lineup since 2015. In this application, it's producing 630 horsepower and 664 pound-feet of torque on its own, already absurd numbers for something with 4 doors and a proper trunk. But then AMG bolted a 201 horsepower electric motor directly to the rear axle, powered by a 6.1 kilowatt-hour battery pack that's mounted low and central for optimal weight distribution. The combined output is 843 horsepower and 1,033 pound-feet of torque. To put that in perspective, that's more power than a Lamborghini Aventador SVJ. In a car with heated and ventilated massage seats, in a car where you can comfortably drive your kids to school and then obliterate someone's track day hero at every stoplight. The performance numbers are genuinely stupid. 0 to 60 happens in 2.9 seconds, which ties the current 911 Turbo S. The quarter-mile disappears in the low 10-second range, and Mercedes claims a top speed of 196 miles per hour if you option the AMG driver's package. For context, that makes this sedan faster in a straight line than the majority of dedicated 2-door sports cars on the market. But here's what actually makes the GT63 E-Performance special beyond just the spec bragging rights. AMG didn't just stuff more power into an existing chassis and call it innovation. They spent serious engineering hours making sure this thing actually works as a cohesive package. The electric motor isn't just there for straight-line party tricks. It provides instant torque fill at low RPMs where turbos are still spooling, essentially eliminating turbo lag entirely. Under hard acceleration, you get this seamless, relentless shove that doesn't let up until you're questioning your life choices or run out of road, whichever comes first. The battery placement and electric motor integration actually improve the car's handling dynamics. The GT63 already used a drift-focused rear-biased all-wheel drive system, and adding that rear-mounted electric motor gave AMG even more control over torque vectoring. In the most aggressive drive modes, you can essentially use electric power to rotate the car mid-corner, adjusting the rear axle speed independently of what the front wheels are doing. It's the kind of technical wizardry that makes this 4,700-pound sedan feel like it weighs 1,000 pounds less when you're actually pushing it. Inside, you get AMG's typical approach to performance luxury. That means Napa leather everywhere, carbon fiber trim that's actually structural and not just plastic with a fancy finish, and the latest iteration of Mercedes MBUX infotainment system spread across a 12.3-inch digital gauge cluster and matching center touchscreen. The front seats are these heavily bolstered performance buckets that'll hold you in place during sustained cornering, but somehow don't become torture devices during long highway slogs. The rear seats are where this car separates itself from two-door supercars. They're actually usable for adult humans, assuming those humans are under 6 feet tall and aren't planning a cross-country road trip back there. But for date nights, client dinners, or occasionally transporting small humans, they're legitimately functional. You've got real doors that open wide enough for normal entry and exit, latch anchors for car seats if your life has reached that stage, and enough legroom that your passengers won't arrive hating you. Now, let's address the elephant in the elegantly appointed room. The GT63 SE Performance starts at around $180,000, and that's before you go nuts in the AMG configurator, adding carbon ceramic brakes, the performance steering wheel, the carbon fiber engine cover that nobody will see, and the premium paint that adds another $5,000 because why not at this point? By the time you've built the car you actually want, you're flirting with $200,000. Is it worth it? That depends entirely on what you value. If you want the absolute bleeding edge of what's possible when you combine internal combustion and electric motivation in a package that seats 4 adults, absolutely. This represents genuine innovation, not just marketing department innovation. But if you just want to flex at the country club and don't actually care about the engineering story, you could save $80,000 and get the non-hybrid GT63S, and honestly, most people would never know the difference. But for the people who appreciate what AMG actually accomplished here, who understand that making 843 horsepower work seamlessly with electric motors and twin turbos and all-wheel drive systems is genuinely difficult engineering, this is one of the most impressive vehicles Mercedes has ever built. And in 20 years, when we're all pretending to enjoy our autonomous electric pods, we'll look back at cars like this as the last hurrah of the truly insane performance sedan. Number 4. Mercedes-Maybach GLS 600, the $200,000 living room on wheels. The Maybach GLS 600 exists because somewhere in Stuttgart, a Mercedes executive looked at the Rolls-Royce Cullinan and thought, we can do that, but with more screens and better cup holders. And honestly, they weren't wrong. Let me be clear about what the Maybach GLS is trying to be. This isn't a performance vehicle. This isn't something you're taking to track days or bragging about in the canyons. This is a 5,700-pound luxury SUV designed for one specific purpose: transporting wealthy humans in the most comfortable environment possible, while simultaneously announcing to everyone within visual range that you have more money than taste, or possibly both in abundance. The exterior proportions are genuinely absurd. This thing measures 205.5 inches long, which is over 17 feet of German engineering that somehow needs to fit in parking spaces designed for normal human vehicles. For context, that's longer than a Chevrolet Suburban. It sits on massive 23-inch wheels that look almost comically large until you remember this thing weighs as much as a small building. The two-tone paint options with the contrasting lower body color are pure Maybach tradition, dating back to the coach-built luxury cars of the 1920s and 30s. But the real story with the GLS 600 isn't the outside. Nobody's buying this to impress people at Cars and Coffee. They're buying it for what happens when you close those massive, vault-like doors and seal yourself away from the unwashed masses in their pedestrian SUVs. The rear cabin is where Maybach spent the serious development money. The rear seats are these throne-like recliners that offer heating, ventilation, and massage functions with something like 10 programs. They recline up to 43.5 degrees, which Maybach determined is the optimal angle for relaxation without actually lying completely flat. There are extendable leg rests that deploy from under the front seats because apparently just sitting normally is for peasants. The rear seat entertainment system includes dual 11.6-inch touchscreens, wireless headphones, and enough computing power to run a small NASA mission. There's a folding center console with a refrigerator that'll keep your champagne at exactly 43 degrees Fahrenheit, which sommelier consultants apparently determined is the perfect temperature for whatever $300 bottle of bubbly you're drinking while stuck in traffic on the 405. Maybach includes these first-class rear seats as standard, but there's an optional executive rear seat package that deletes the middle seat entirely and adds even more luxurious individual captain's chairs. This is what you order when you want to make absolutely certain that your vehicle will never, under any circumstances, be used for actual practical purposes like transporting more than 4 people. The materials throughout the cabin are genuinely impressive. We're talking Napa leather sourced from bulls raised at high altitudes where there are fewer insect bites to damage the hide. I'm not making that up. That's an actual thing Maybach specifies. The wood trim is real open-pore wood, not the glossy plastic-looking stuff you get in lesser vehicles. The metal accents are actual rose gold or silver, not painted plastic. Under that massive hood sits AMG's 4-liter twin-turbo V8, producing 550 horsepower and 538 pound-feet of torque. It's paired with a 48-volt mild hybrid system that provides an additional 21 horsepower and helps smooth out the start-stop system in traffic. The 9-speed automatic transmission is tuned for comfort above all else, with shifts so smooth you'll barely notice them happening unless you're really paying attention. The performance is shockingly good for something this large. 0 to 60 happens in 4.1 seconds, which is absurd for a 3-ton SUV. Top speed is electronically limited to 155 miles per hour, which is purely academic because nobody's tracking this thing. But the real party trick is how Maybach's e-active body control suspension manages to make this massive vehicle feel almost serene over broken pavement. This system uses a 48-volt hydraulic setup to actively control each wheel independently, essentially scanning the road ahead with a stereo camera and pre-adjusting the suspension before you hit bumps. It can even lean the vehicle into corners to reduce body roll, like a motorcycle, but with more Napa leather. When you combine this with the acoustic laminated glass, the active noise cancellation through the audio system, and the sheer mass of sound-deadening material, the interior becomes genuinely quieter than most home offices. Now, pricing. The GLS 600 starts at around $170,000, but nobody actually pays that. By the time you add the two-tone paint, the executive rear seat package, the Burmester 3D surround sound system with 26 speakers, and all the other options that make this actually a Maybach instead of just an expensive GLS, you're looking at $200,000 to $220,000. Is it worth it? That's a philosophical question more than a practical one. If you need the ultimate luxury SUV and Rolls-Royce Cullinan money feels excessive, or if you value Mercedes dealer network over Bentley's more limited service options, then yes, the GLS 600 absolutely delivers. This is one of the most comfortable vehicles on earth, period. But you're paying a massive premium over the standard AMG GLS 63, which offers most of the performance and luxury for $100,000 less. The Maybach GLS exists in that rarefied space where rational purchasing decisions don't really apply. If you're cross-shopping this against anything, you've already missed the point. Number 3. Mercedes-Benz EQE 350 Plus, the electric future that actually works. Let's talk about Mercedes' electric future, because unlike some legacy manufacturers who are clearly just building compliance cars to satisfy regulators while praying that EV adoption somehow reverses, Mercedes actually seems serious about this transition. The EQE 350 Plus isn't their halo electric vehicle. That's the EQS. This is their mainstream luxury electric sedan, and it's the car that'll determine whether Mercedes can actually compete with Tesla in the segment they currently dominate. The first thing you notice about the EQE is how committed Mercedes is to making this look like an electric vehicle. This isn't like the EQC, which was basically a GLC with batteries stuffed underneath and some blue accent lighting. The EQE has its own dedicated EVA2 electric platform, which allowed Mercedes designers to create proportions that would be impossible with internal combustion packaging requirements. That means a really short front overhang, a long wheelbase relative to overall length, and this swoopy aerodynamic roofline that gives the whole car a one-motion profile. The drag coefficient is 0.22, which ties it to the EQS as one of the most aerodynamic production vehicles ever built. For context, that's slipperier than a Porsche 911. Every bit of that aerodynamic efficiency directly translates to range, which is the only number that actually matters with electric vehicles. The front fascia is this smooth, blanked-off panel where a traditional grille would be, because, of course, it doesn't need cooling airflow like a combustion engine. Mercedes calls it a black panel design, and it's studded with subtle three-pointed star patterns that light up when you approach the vehicle. It's a nice detail that separates this from looking like an appliance. Inside is where Mercedes really makes its case as a luxury vehicle rather than just an electric car. The standard setup gives you a 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster and a 12.8-inch central touchscreen running Mercedes' latest MBX UX. But the real showpiece is the optional Hyperscreen, which is essentially 3 screens under a single curved glass panel that spans the entire dashboard from A-pillar to A-pillar. I know what you're thinking. That sounds like the kind of gimmick that's cool in photos but annoying in real life. And honestly, in some implementations, you'd be right. But Mercedes actually put serious thought into how this works. The passenger screen can display full navigation, video content, even streaming apps, but it uses a special privacy screen technology so the driver can't see it. The system is smart enough to dim the passenger screen if nobody's sitting there. The whole interface uses haptic feedback and forced touch inputs that give it this mechanical quality feel that's miles better than just tapping glass. The MBX UX system itself has gotten genuinely good. It learns your patterns and can predict what you want based on time of day and location. If you get in the car every morning at 7 a.m. and drive to the same coffee shop, it'll automatically suggest navigation there and precondition your favorite seat settings. It sounds creepy, and maybe it is, but in practice, it's actually useful rather than intrusive. Under that smooth exterior sits a 90.6 kilowatt-hour battery pack, which is genuinely competitive in this segment. Mercedes claims 305 miles of EPA range, which in real-world mixed driving tends to work out to about 260 to 280 miles, depending on how aggressive you are with the throttle and whether you're running climate control. The powertrain on the 350 Plus model is a single rear-mounted electric motor producing 288 horsepower and 391 pound-feet of torque. That's not eye-watering by modern EV standards, but it's more than adequate for a luxury sedan. 0 to 60 takes about 5.6 seconds, which is quick enough to be satisfying, but not so fast that you're constantly terrifying yourself or your passengers. What's more interesting is how Mercedes tuned the driving dynamics. Unlike Tesla, which seems to prioritize acceleration above all else, Mercedes focused on making the EQE feel like a traditional luxury sedan that just happens to be electric. The steering has actual weight and feedback, rather than feeling like a video game controller. The suspension tuning prioritizes comfort without becoming floaty or disconnected. The regenerative braking can be adjusted from basically off to aggressive one-pedal driving, and unlike some systems, it actually feels natural rather than grabby. The air suspension is standard, and it does an impressive job managing the 5,100-pound curb weight. This is a heavy car, there's no getting around that, but it doesn't feel ponderous or cumbersome in normal driving. The battery pack is mounted low and central, which gives it a lower center of gravity than most combustion sedans, and helps it feel planted through corners. Charging is where the EQE shows Mercedes learned from early EV mistakes. It supports up to 170 kilowatt DC fast charging, which means you can go from 10% to 80% in about 32 minutes under ideal conditions. That's using a 350 kilowatt capable charger on a good day. In more realistic scenarios with 150 kilowatt chargers, you're looking at closer to 40 minutes, which is long enough to grab lunch, but not so long that it becomes a genuine inconvenience on road trips. For home charging, the EQE comes with an 11 kilowatt onboard charger as standard, which means you can fully charge overnight using a level 2 home charger. Mercedes' Me Charge system integrates with the navigation to show real-time availability at charging stations and can route you to chargers that are actually functional, which is more valuable than it sounds when dealing with the current state of public charging infrastructure. Pricing starts at $74,900, which positions it directly against the Tesla Model S and the upcoming BMW i5. That's before any federal tax credits, which could knock $7,500 off depending on your tax situation and whether the vehicle still qualifies under the current rules. Here's my take on whether the EQE is worth it. If you're already committed to electric and you value traditional luxury car refinement over raw performance numbers, this is one of the best options available. It feels like a proper Mercedes in a way that Tesla's products, for all their technological achievement, simply don't. The materials are better, the ride quality is more sophisticated, and the dealer network means you can actually get service without dealing with the nightmare stories you hear about Tesla service centers. But if you're not already sold on electric, the EQE probably won't convert you. The range is good, but not class-leading. The charging infrastructure, through no fault of Mercedes, is still inconsistent, and if you don't have home charging available, the ownership experience becomes significantly less convenient. The EQE is proof that Mercedes can build a genuinely competitive electric vehicle when they actually commit to it. Whether that's enough to pull buyers away from Tesla remains to be seen, but this is no longer a compromised compliance car. This is a legitimate luxury sedan that happens to be electric. Number 2. Mercedes-Maybach S-Class S680 Night Series. Old money in new sheet metal. If the Maybach GLS is new money screaming for attention, the Maybach S-Class is old money that doesn't need to say a word. This is the car that pulls up to private equity meetings, diplomatic functions, and the kind of restaurants that don't list prices on the menu, because if you need to ask, you shouldn't be there. The Night Series specifically takes Maybach's already understated approach to luxury and dials it even further into stealth wealth territory. Where a standard Maybach S-Class might feature bright chrome trim and two-tone paint, the Night Series blacks out everything. The chrome surround on the grille gets replaced with high-gloss black. The 20-inch monoblock wheels are finished in black. Even the Maybach badges get darkened. The only real visual tells that this isn't just a very expensive S-Class are the extended wheelbase, the different C-pillar design, and the subtle Maybach emblems. It's the automotive equivalent of wearing a $15,000 Laura Piana cashmere sweater that looks like it came from Target until you touch it. If you know, you know. If you don't, that's kind of the point. The extended wheelbase adds 7 inches compared to a long wheelbase S-Class, and all of that goes to rear passenger space. Because let's be honest about what this car is. Nobody's buying a Maybach S-Class to drive themselves. This is a car for being driven in. Mercedes knows this, which is why they spent the development budget on making the rear cabin absolutely perfect. The rear seats are these executive lounge chairs that recline up to 43.5 degrees and feature heating, ventilation, and massage with hot stone functionality. I'm not sure what hot stone massage means in an automotive context, but apparently it's important enough that Mercedes' marketing team put it in the brochure. The leg rests extend from beneath the front seats, and when you're fully reclined with the massage running and the ambient lighting set to your preferred color, it's legitimately more comfortable than most first-class airline seats. There are folding tables that deploy from the front seat backs, perfect for working on your laptop or reviewing contracts while your driver navigates traffic. The rear entertainment system includes dual screens, wireless headphones, and enough connectivity that you could legitimately run board meetings from the back seat. The refrigerator in the rear center console keeps champagne at the optimal temperature, because of course it does. The materials throughout are absurd in the best way possible. Nappa leather covers every surface that might contact human skin. The wood trim is real wood, sustainably sourced and hand-finished by craftspeople in Germany who've probably been doing this longer than I've been alive. The metal accents are actual silver, not painted plastic trying to look like silver. But here's what separates the Maybach S-Class from just being an expensive S-Class with better seats. The engineering that goes into making this 5,600-pound vehicle feel like it's floating on clouds. The air suspension system uses a stereo camera to scan the road ahead and pre-adjust the dampers before you hit bumps. It's the same e-active body control system from the GLS, and in the S-Class it's tuned even more aggressively for comfort. The result is a ride quality that's genuinely difficult to describe if you haven't experienced it. I've driven on broken Los Angeles streets that would normally rattle fillings loose in a normal car, and in the Maybach S-Class, they feel like minor ripples. The suspension just absorbs everything with this serene competence that makes you wonder why every car can't ride like this, until you remember that this system probably costs more than an entire Honda Civic. Under the hood, the S680 gets a 6-liter twin-turbo V12, producing 621 horsepower and 664 pound-feet of torque. Yes, a V12 in 2024. When everyone else is downsizing to 4 cylinders and hybrids, Maybach is still hand-building 12-cylinder engines because some traditions matter. The performance is genuinely shocking. 0 to 60 happens in 4.4 seconds, which is absurd for something this large and heavy. Top speed is electronically limited to 130 miles per hour, though I suspect the kind of people buying Maybach S-classes aren't particularly interested in top speed runs. The 9-speed automatic transmission shifts with this smooth, almost imperceptible quality where you only know gears are changing because the tachometer needle moves. But the real achievement is how quiet Mercedes made the cabin. The acoustic laminated glass, active noise cancellation through the Burmester 4D sound system, and the sheer amount of sound deadening material result in a cabin that measures around 56 decibels at 60 miles per hour. For context, a normal conversation is about 60 decibels. This cabin is quieter than talking to someone sitting next to you. The Night Series starts at around $230,000, but that's almost meaningless because nobody's ordering a base Maybach. By the time you add the rear seat entertainment package, the upgraded Burmester sound system, the executive rear seat configuration, and whatever bespoke options Maybach's department dreams up, you're approaching $300,000. Is it worth it? If you need to ask, it's probably not for you, and I don't mean that dismissively. The Maybach S-Class exists in a segment where rational value calculations don't apply. You're not buying this because it's the most horsepower per dollar or the fastest around the Nuremberg ring. You're buying it because you want the best luxury sedan that Mercedes-Benz can build, and you're willing to pay whatever that costs. For people who spend significant time being driven, who conduct business from the back seat, who value absolute comfort and refinement over everything else, the Maybach S-Class is genuinely unmatched. Rolls-Royce might have more presence and heritage, Bentley might offer more customization, but for pure, modern luxury combined with German engineering competence, nothing touches the Maybach S-Class. This is the car that'll still be considered a classic in 30 years, the same way W126 and W140 S-Classes are revered today. Mercedes built their reputation on cars like this, and the fact that they're still building them in 2024 with V12 engines and hand-stitched interiors says something important about their commitment to a certain kind of excellence, even as the rest of the industry races towards electrification and cost-cutting. Number 1. Mercedes-AMG G63. The $180,000 military vehicle cosplaying as luxury. The G-Wagon is genuinely one of the most absurd vehicles in production, and I mean that as the highest compliment. This thing started life in 1979 as a military vehicle designed for the German army. It was meant to ford rivers, climb mountains, and survive battlefield conditions. It was about as luxurious as a shovel. 45 years later, Mercedes is still building what's fundamentally the same vehicle with the same body-on-frame construction, the same solid axles front and rear, and the same agricultural door hinges that clang shut with a sound that costs $180,000 to experience. Except now it's got Napa leather, heated seats, and a 577 horsepower twin-turbo V8. It makes absolutely no sense. It's perfect. Let's start with what makes the G63 genuinely special from an engineering perspective. This is one of the last body-on-frame luxury vehicles still in production. That means the body and the frame are separate components, unlike unibody construction where they're integrated. This is the same basic architecture you'd find in a Ford F-150 or a Jeep Wrangler, and it's completely unnecessary for the way 99% of G-Wagon owners actually use their vehicles. But it gives the G63 capabilities that ununibody luxury SUVs can't match. We're talking about 9.5 inches of ground clearance, 3 locking differentials, front, center, and rear, a low-range transfer case for serious off-road work, approach and departure angles that would make a Jeep Rubicon jealous. This thing can ford water up to 27.5 inches deep and climb grades up to 100%. When's the last time you saw a G-Wagon actually doing any of that? Exactly. Most of these never see anything more challenging than a speed bump at Whole Foods. But the capability is there if you need it, and there's something genuinely charming about a vehicle that's massively overbuilt for its intended purpose. The styling is iconic at this point. It's been refined over the years. The current generation is actually the first major redesign since 1979, but Mercedes kept all the visual elements that make a G-Wagon recognizable from 500 yards. The boxy, upright proportions, the exposed door hinges, the side-mounted spare tire carrier, the angular wheel arches. It's a shape that should look dated and awkward next to modern SUVs with their swept-back windshields and aerodynamic curves. Instead, it looks purposeful and timeless. Put a 1985 G-Wagon next to a 2024 model, and they're clearly related in a way that no other vehicle line can claim. Inside is where the cognitive dissonance really kicks in. You climb up into this military-grade cabin and you're immediately surrounded by leather, carbon fiber, and aluminum that's been finished to the same standards as the S-Class. The seats are these heavily bolstered AMG Sport buckets that are somehow both supportive during aggressive driving and comfortable during long highway runs. The dashboard features Mercedes' latest MBUX infotainment system with a 12.3-inch center touchscreen and digital gauge cluster. But then you close the door and it makes that distinctive G-Wagon clunk that sounds like you're sealing a bank vault. The window switches are mounted on the center console instead of the doors because of how thick the doors need to be for off-road durability. You sit bolt upright with a commanding view of the road, but the actual outward visibility is pretty terrible because of how thick the A-pillars are. It's this fascinating combination of old-school engineering and modern luxury, and somehow it works. Under that massive flat hood sits AMG's ubiquitous 4.0-liter twin-turbo V8, here producing 577 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque. It's connected to AMG's SpeedShift 9-speed automatic transmission and permanent all-wheel drive with a 40-60 torque split favoring the rear wheels. The performance numbers are absolutely ludicrous for something that's fundamentally a brick with wheels. 0 to 60 happens in 4.5 seconds. The quarter mile disappears in the low 13-second range. Top speed is 137 miles per hour, limited by aerodynamics that were designed in the late 1970s by people who'd never heard of wind tunnels. It's loud. Not just the exhaust, which AMG tuned to be deliberately aggressive with pops and crackles on overrun, but the whole experience. Wind noise at highway speeds is noticeable because you're basically driving a refrigerator at 80 miles per hour. Tire noise is significant on rough pavement. The body-on-frame construction means you get occasional squeaks and rattles over rough roads that would never make it through quality control on a unibody luxury vehicle. And somehow, none of that matters, because the G63 isn't trying to be the most refined SUV, or the quietest, or the most efficient. It's trying to be a G-Wagon with enough power to make you giggle like a child every time you floor it, and at that specific mission, it absolutely succeeds. The handling is exactly what you'd expect from a tall, heavy SUV with solid axles and a high center of gravity. It doesn't defy physics, it just has enough power and tire to overwhelm them temporarily. The steering is slow and vague by modern standards. Body roll in corners is significant enough that your passengers will question your life choices. The brakes are powerful, but you can feel the weight they're trying to manage every time you slow down aggressively. But when you stop trying to drive it like a sports car and just accept it for what it is, it's genuinely enjoyable. The ride quality is actually quite good for what it is. The suspension does a nice job soaking up bumps without feeling floaty. The seating position gives you this commanding view of traffic, and there's something undeniably fun about driving something that looks this purposeful, even if the most challenging terrain you'll encounter is the parking lot at your kid's soccer game. Pricing for the G63 starts at $183,000, and that's before you start adding options. And you will add options because Mercedes makes sure the base model is just incomplete enough that you can't resist ticking boxes. The night package blacks out all the chrome. The AMG driver's package raises the top speed limiter. The carbon fiber trim package adds interior bling. Before you know it, you're at $220,000, and you haven't even gotten to the truly ridiculous stuff like the Burmester 3D sound system or the exclusive paint colors. Is the G63 worth it? On paper, absolutely not. For $180,000, you could buy a Range Rover that's more refined, a Porsche Cayenne Turbo that's faster, or a loaded domestic pickup truck and have $100,000 left over for therapy to deal with whatever trauma led you to consider buying a G-Wagon in the first place. But the G63 isn't a rational purchase. It's an icon. It's a vehicle with genuine heritage and capability that somehow also became a status symbol. It's one of the last truly characterful SUVs in a segment that's increasingly becoming homogenized into aerodynamic blobs designed by focus groups and efficiency regulations. In 20 years, when everything's electric and autonomous and optimized within an inch of its life, we'll look back at the G63 as one of the last vehicles that truly didn't care to be sensible. And that's worth celebrating. So, there you have it. 5 Mercedes vehicles that represent different aspects of what Mercedes does well. The GT63 SE performance shows they can innovate with hybrid technology. The Maybach GLS proves they understand luxury SUV buyers. The EQE demonstrates they're serious about electrification. The Maybach S-Class continues the tradition of building the ultimate luxury sedan. And the G63 is just pure, unfiltered automotive id in the best possible way. What's your take? Did I miss an obvious choice? Are you in the comments right now furiously typing about how the AMG GT Black Series should have made the list? Let me know what Mercedes you'd actually spend your own money on, assuming you have 6 figures lying around and questionable financial priorities. And if you made it this far, hit that subscribe button because we've got a lot more of this kind of deep dive content coming. I'll see you in the next one.